on our talk group once it's all over and said and done. Let's see here. So we're going to start obviously in Command because that's what this class is about. And I am going to move our little box down here. And I am also going to open up the Command training. And we're going to scroll down until we see opportunities. The reason we are going to be looking at opportunities is because that is where your sale pipeline exists and that is where your compliance will take place. So it's considered opportunities in the training. And then you just click this down arrow and it will show you the different sessions. So the first being manage your opportunities. It's an hour-long video, which is probably one of the longest ones that I've seen in here. Usually they're much, much shorter. Creating an opportunity, adding a listing to an opportunity, manage your opportunities, and search all opportunities. So if you have any questions about how to create your opportunity or anything of that nature, this is where you're gonna go, session 1. If you don't quite know the process of creating an offer, we're going to be going over that a little bit today. There will be a commissions class this month. So we're not going to go over commissions because that's not really my forte, that's Sherry's forte. However, I will show you how to get to the section where you create an offer and what an offer is going to look like. However, a 2-minute video, it's really not a complicated process. And there's also a 10-minute video on how to manage your offers. So those are here if you have any questions after we go over just briefly how to create that offer. And then you've got session 3, prep to get paid, command, compliance, and commissions. This is an hour-long video. This is basically what we're going to be talking about today. Create and connect your document management account. That's talking basically about DocuSign. So 20-minute read, create a DocuSign room for an opportunity, access, create and send envelopes, add compliance documents to an opportunity. We will be going over that part as well. But I am going to open the article just so that way I can reference it when we're going through that. Submit compliance documents to your market center and replace rejected documents. So we will also go over that part as well. So that's going to be in session 3. Again, I'm just going over these so that way you have the opportunity to see where this information is available to you outside of this class. That way, if in a few minutes after the class you go to do something and you're like, oh, I don't remember how to do that part, you'll have a reference point for where to go to find that. So this also is talking about DocuSign. Now, DocuSign tends to be one of the more confusing aspects of compliance. So there are quite a few little things here for you to know how to do. Adding signatures to forms in DocuSign. Now, we have a DocuSign class every Monday, and Monday coming up, we are going to be talking about documents, so we will see how to add those. How to void or cancel an envelope in DocuSign. Add a one-off compliance document checklist item to an opportunity. We will talk about that. Create and manage custom folders and opportunities. Okay, so needless to say, there's tons of information in here for you guys to refer to if you have any questions in that particular regard. You are always welcome to unmute yourself if you do have a question while I'm doing this, just as an FYI. So there are 2 ways to get to your opportunity. As you're aware, you can go through your contacts, find the contact, and then go to their specific opportunities, or you can click on this handshake little here. It's called opportunities. That will bring you to your pipeline. So what I want to point out about your pipeline is that you have the phases here. That's what these are. These are your phases, and you have them for listing and you have them for buyer. Now, they are titled the same. However, once you are inside of a phase, there are stages to that phase, and these are editable. You may edit your stages at any time. If open houses isn't something that applies to you because you don't do a lot of open houses, then you don't need that one. You can remove it. If you don't feel that you want a watch category, you want to nurture, you want open houses, you want referrals, you want door knocking, say door knocking is a thing for you, you can add a door knocking stage. So that is something that you can do to edit these and make them more personal for you and your business. But these names, this cultivate, appointment, active, under contract, close, those will always remain the same. You cannot edit those names. So these will always be the phases of your transaction. The stages you can edit to make them personal. You can also add checklists to each one of these stages. So that way, as you move your opportunity through these stages, you can just select it, drag and drop, and then the checklist that you have created here will carry over with that person. Now you can see I have a checklist set up for my watch category. I do not have one set up for my nurture. So when I moved it over, it now says I don't have any checklist items here. But when I move it back, it will show me I have 8 items available for my checklist. So that is the listing pipeline here. And then you have the same for the buyer pipeline, same thing applies. So this cultivate, appointment, active, under contract, close will always be named as such, and they will always remain that way. However, when you click on it for a buyer, you will see that there is the same type of stages set up, and you can edit those stages. So if for a buyer, there is a process that you have, which is different from that of a listing, you may want to have additional stages in here, or these stages may not apply to you. Another thing to consider is when you go over to the side here where you see GCI, is when you are putting in information for your opportunities, you want to make sure that you are as detailed as possible, because the numbers that populate over on this side of your pipeline come from within your opportunity. So I'm going to go to active just to click on one to show you. Mickey Mouse here has an opportunity that is started. So I'm going to click on that and open up this opportunity. When I scroll down here, I have an estimated close date. I do not have an appointment scheduled, an appointment date, an agreement won, a contract closed, or a closed date listed. So this is why these are important. When you put in an appointment scheduled, say I scheduled the appointment today, the appointment date is scheduled for tomorrow, so I would put tomorrow's date. I got them to sign the contract at that appointment. So same day that you have your appointment, you have the agreement is won, right? And then you're going to put the date for under contract. The reason that you do all of these things is because when you go back to this pipeline, you're going to see on the bottom here, there's this little part that says average time, 35 days, average time, 45 days, average time, 34 days. This helps you calculate what you can expect to see for your sales in a timeline. So if you have all of those dates filled out, this system will be able to calculate for you, on average, you have people who sit in an appointment phase for 35 days. Maybe that's not so great. Maybe that's something that you need to be paying attention to, what your systems are during that appointment phase to make that timeline shorter. So that way you have a faster rate of turnover from the time that you have that initial contact with somebody in the cultivate phase and when their listing goes active. Maybe there's something in that appointment section that can be improved upon to help your business get boosted, right? Same for under contract now. So I went active, they sit in there for about 34 days. That's actually not so bad. That means it's on the market for a month. Right now, they're on the market for like a day. So, but average time is 34 days, right? So you get under contract. Well, now my under contract is 127 days. So what is happening in my under contract that is making that average time take so long? Is it that I need to make sure that my buyers, So this, now my buyers are only 21 days, so I must be doing really good with buyers there. But for listings, so is it because there's an issue with inspections? Should I start suggesting to my listings that they have pre-inspections? Should I be looking at the types of properties that I am listing? And if they are listings that have special circumstances, should I be taking that into consideration to help them in the under contract phase move a little bit more smoothly? There are things that these timelines can actually really help you in developing your business and making it really, really strong, right? So the same for buyers. I have an appointment phase of 67 days. Wow, that's really long. But my under contract is super short, 21 days, right? So I must be doing something right on that end. So I'm working really well with my buyers. So that's awesome. Now you know that you have a shortcoming here in your listings and you're going through on your buyers quite well. Now there is a leases one here. However, we don't really have too many property managers who use this particular pipeline, and so we're not really going to talk about it. With that being said, your ratios. The probable and potential income is calculated for you based on the numbers that you put inside that opportunity. So when you have your dates put in, it will tell you what your conversion rates are. Now this is really good. The reason this is really good is because, again, it helps your business. If you are spending a lot of money on mailers and you're not having a high conversion rate of the contacts that you're receiving from those mailers, then maybe your money and your time is better spent on something like door knocking, which is providing you higher conversion rates on buyers and listings. So these numbers also help you in that respect. So we're going to create an opportunity through here, just so that way we can, I'm going to do a buyer. And let's see, it's going to be Donna Duck. Perfect. So now I have the client's name. The opportunity name will auto-populate. It's a buyer, so it's just going to put Donna Duck buyer. And that is okay. I know I always harp on the fact that you have to have the address first and then buyer. The reason that it's acceptable to start your buyer opportunity with just the name of the buyer is because until you have a contract, you don't have an address. So it's completely acceptable for you to not list an address in the beginning of this opportunity, and you do not have to wait until you have a contract to start this opportunity. In fact, I highly recommend waiting until you have a contract, because then it's a lot of work all at once and it will be time consuming and a little bit frustrating. So it is a great idea that once you have a buyer, that you create the opportunity, and then you can go back and edit the details as things occur. If you have custom tags for your opportunities, you can put them in there. I'm going to be doing a class that's going to talk about those, and I'm going to create some. I don't have any created right now, so there aren't any for me to use. My estimated close date. Now, like I said, you don't have a contract, so you don't really know what your estimated close date will be. However, I have an idea of when my client would like to close, and that's going to be the end of July. They want to be in before August, right? So I'm going to put in July 31st. I'm not going to put in a time frame because I have an estimated close date. That's when I want them to have that. So let's see, what's my budget going to be? I'm going to do a good budget, or a mid-level budget, because right now it's a very hot market for this price range, which means multiple offers, and that's going to be something that I want to talk about in the opportunity. So I'm gonna put that price point. And then your commission rate is always 3%, whether you have the listing or the buyer. It's going to be 3%. I realize that a commission is technically 6%, but you always split that 3 and 3. This is important to pay attention to, because if you accidentally put 6 in there, which some people have done, it can throw off all of your numbers. And then when you go to request your DA, the numbers that it's calculating for you will be based on 6%, and you're not getting 6% of a commission. You're only going to get 3%, even if you're double ending it, because your buyer is going to give you 3 and your listing is going to give you 3. And you have to have 2 separate DAs for those. So that is something to keep in mind. Always think that 3. I am going to put this in the appointment phase, and it's going to be in scheduling. Now, if you look at this drop down, everything that has a phase, which means your cultivate, appointment, and active, they do have that, and then the stages pop up depending on what your stages are within that phase. So you can kind of pick where it's going to go, but I'm going to put it in appointment in scheduling because that's what I want to do. And then hit create. Okay, so you're going to see that you have the information that I've entered here, right? So I am going to edit this immediately because one of the things that I want to include here that was not part of the creating is the appointment scheduled. So I have this in scheduling. I have an appointment scheduled for tomorrow, the 4th. So it's, or I'm sorry, yes. So, yes. So I scheduled it for the 4th. Now, when the 4th comes, if we've kept that appointment, I'm going to put the 4th here as well, okay? If they sign the contract while we are at that appointment, or they say yes, and I want to DocuSign that form instead of having them wet signature, then you can, even while you're at the table, if you wanted to, send the email with that information. Although I highly recommend using DocuSign. Some people do feel more comfortable bringing a print contract and then inserting it. That is absolutely fine. When you are working with a buyer, your buyer brokerage agreement is not something that we compliance check, so it's whatever works for you, and you can do that. You can put that into your DocuSign just for your records, so that way you have it. Say that they sign it on the same day. Now I'm going to put my agreement 1 on that day. Say they don't sign it on that day. My agreement 1 is going to be the next day. Okay? And then we don't have a contract date or a close date because this is a buyer and we don't have a contract yet. I do have the budget still in here. This is something that they actually just recently added, and I really do kind of like that because it is nice to know what type of financing you're going to be having, because it means different things for you. So I'm going to say that this person is going to do a VA loan. Save. So I have my finance type. This is my pre-calculated commission. This does not include anything that has to do with your cap or your royalty. This is just a flat conversion of what 3% of $150,000 is. And then if I don't have any more information that I can add, then I don't have any more information that I can add at this point because I don't have a contract, so I don't have an address. You're going to see the next little tab in this opportunity is buyer profile. This has to do with your app. So if you have a buyer and you feel confident in the use of your app, I recommend that you send it to them. Give it to them, let them register for it. I think they need just their name and their email to register, just like on any other real estate app. And once they do, this will change from not registered with consumer platform to registered with consumer platform. And then your guide. So once they're registered, you can put the Kelly guide will be provided to them in their app. So let me grab my phone. I'll be right back. So when they're in their consumer app, I have to actually see my face to see if I'm showing you this, so hold on one second. Okay, so when they're in their app, that center button says guide. So that is what you have access to in this tab. The guide will be here because you have already set that up, and it will be accessible. And then if, say, they get pre-approved, right? They can mark in their app, oh, I've done that, and hit the little check mark. It will auto-populate in your command, in your opportunity on this buyer that they've completed that step. So you'll see it. You'll get probably a little, what do they call a little red bubble right there, that something happened, right? So there will be a notification something has happened, right? Now, what if they didn't select the guide and say that they did it? But you know that they did it because they said, okay, I got pre-approved, and you got the little pre-approval thing and blah, blah, blah. You can mark it off here, and it will auto update on their app. It will look at they'll click on that little button, and that will be checked off, and it will bring them to the next step automatically. Start your home search, whatever the next step is in your Kelly guide, because you can personalize that sort of. You can change the pictures, you can kind of change what it says. You can add or move steps around, things of that nature, but it's pretty straightforward for the buyer or the seller. Like, they're only the two lists. So, but you can personalize them. So that is something that is pretty neat. That is where it is stored for the guide. This is not talking about if they heart things or anything like that. This is just for the guide. And then we're going to get into documents. So you're going to see when you have a buyer, this confuses people frequently. So I'm going to just make this really, really straightforward as possible. When you're working with a buyer and you have a buyer brokerage agreement and all that stuff, it starts you off in consultation. There's nothing that we have to compliance check when you are consulting with a buyer. There just isn't. There's nothing that we have to have for our compliance, right? It's not until you go under contract that we start to compliance check what you have with your buyer. We have worked with Peggy and with Sherry as the MCA. They've come together and they created this list in order. If you, Dana, unfortunately, you weren't here during last year before, when we had a printed out list of what you have to have for compliance review in Dotloop, right? Well, in Command with DocuSign, we don't have a printed out sheet of what you need to have for compliance review. So we instead have just this list. This list is the printed out version that we would be able to hand out to people to tell them what they have to have. So you will have an MLS pending printout, right? It says conditionally required. Why is it conditionally required? Because you don't own the listing. So you don't control if the listing agent marks it as pending. So you may not have a pending MLS printout sheet. Now, let's all hope that that's not the case and that it's easy enough for you to grab it from the MLS, because they did change the status. But it is conditionally required because you don't physically have control over that listing, right? You need an acknowledgement and confirmation of disclosures. That's required. You have to have that in here. If you don't, your file is going to get rejected. A counteroffer. Conditionally required where applicable. If they accept your offer, you're not going to have a counteroffer. And that seems pretty straightforward. But if you do, it needs to be in here. Sales contract, required. You have to have it. Financing supplement, conditionally required. Not everything will need a financing supplement. Seems pretty straightforward. So some of these are very dependent upon the actual details of your transaction. That's why they say conditionally required. Earnest money receipt, conditionally required where applicable. Now, I will say that it is the recommendation that you use our office for earnest money holding, because if you use your title company, there can be some complications if the deal falls through. And there are a few people who have had some bumps in the road when it comes to that. There are a few people who just prefer to have the title companies hold the earnest money. It is up to you. You are the owner of your business, so that's something that you have to make the decision on. If you have an earnest money held here, when you submit it to Sherry, you create your own earnest money receipt, basically. So that is what you would be putting in here. So you would have that from us for sure. What the title companies do, it would depend on the title company, and I don't really know a whole lot about that. So, but yes, make sure you have that. property condition disclosure required. Lead-based paint, this one confuses people. I've actually had some people ask me questions about it recently, so I will just mention lead-based paint. It says right in here, conditionally required properties built prior to 1978. So if the property is 1978 or older, you have to have a lead-based paint disclosure. Now, there are people, agents, who like to provide the lead-based paint pamphlet and have their clients initial it, right? Just so that way they know that they've received it. Even if the home is not built prior to 1978, it is absolutely fine for you to do that. And if you want to include it in here, you can, but it will not go into this lead-based paint disclosure. You would have to add an item, put the document's name being, what would the document name be? Lead-based paint pamphlet, right? You could put that information in there and then click add, and that would be added to the very bottom. See, actually Protect Your Family from Lead-Based Paint Pamphlet is actually on the bottom here. But I'm just saying it does not go in this section. So that's one of the questions that I've had is they were putting it in the disclosure and they were getting dinged because they had the lead-based paint pamphlet here and they didn't have the lead-based paint disclosure. And then they were like, but it was built in like 2001. It doesn't need a lead-based paint disclosure. But they had one technically submitted, but they had the wrong form in here. So just pay attention to that because you don't want to put the pamphlet in the disclosure log. Otherwise, that will make it look like you've submitted the wrong form and Bob will request the disclosure. And if you don't have one, it won't be helpful. But down at the bottom here, Protect Your Family from Lead-Based Paint pamphlet, there is a spot. It is optional, so you don't have to submit it if you don't send that to your people to get the signature line or anything like that. You can send it in DocuSign even if you don't sign it, but just know that they are two separate things. So don't submit the pamphlet as a disclosure. Okay, so broker duties and responsibilities to seller and buyer required. So you remember how I said the buyer broker agreement was not something that we compliance check when you start? It's because until you go under contract, we don't need it. So if you have I have a conversation with Paula and I say, Paula, I really think that I would be an excellent real estate agent for you to do business with. And Paula says, heck yeah, girl, get some. And signs my broker buyer agreement. I do not have to submit that for compliance check today or tomorrow. I have to submit it when I have a contract that goes, because you're not going to submit this to the MC until you have a complete file to be compliance checked, or until your contract is, or until you have an active contract and it's 24 hours after that.
So the buyer broker goes like 2 down. This one's a little bit different.
Yeah, I know the buyer broker.
Okay.
But I'm saying like this is where you would put that. So don't put it in the consultation when you first get it. You put it here once you have a contract. That's why it does say, it says optional here, because it's not necessarily required for us to compliance review, but it's a good idea to include it in your file because if there do come up any issues, you want to be able to have documentation to prove that you had an agreement with that person. So it is a good idea to include it here, even though it says optional. And if you have broker duty and responsibilities to seller and buyer, that's required. You have to make sure that part is in there. Buyer estimate cost sheet. This one, we have a class coming up in June. It will be taught by Angie Haig. And I highly recommend everybody go to it. Buyer cost estimate and seller net sheets seem to be a little bit tricky for some people. And there is a way to set up a template within DocuSign to make it auto-populate some of the totals for you and things of that nature. We did do a math workshop on that, and I'm gonna say it would be a very good idea for you to know how to write these out by hand. There are, of course, apps, depending on which company you work with. I think First American has an app, and who's the other one that has a website? CCA.
Yeah, Cleveland County.
And
CTO.
There's another one. I can't think of it, but Kara showed me that one in one of the math workshop classes that I've done. And, you know,
Chicago Title.
Chicago Title, that's the one. Good morning. Good morning. So there are apps and websites that will help you in coming up with what these costs might be. CCA is a good one because they actually have a little, it's like a bifold, but it's like no bigger than my hands. And it's usually in our mailroom. And it has a breakdown of what their fees are, what their costs are. And that's pretty good because it gives you the cost estimates of what's available there. Now, First Capital Mortgage, that's the one I was thinking of. With Heather Schroeder, the Mortgage Chicks, she's one of our allied partners. She has done the buyer cost estimate and seller net sheet class last time. So they also have a website to help you with this. And one of the things that's really important is you just want to be as accurate as possible with the fees of all the title companies and things of that nature. So that kind of predetermines those fees for you, so that way it kind of gives you an idea. Yeah, so just those can be a little tricky. I highly recommend everybody go to a class. It's not my strong suit, so I'm not going to go over them or anything like that, because I myself don't quite understand all of the fees, and Oklahoma, or every state rather, has different requirements and option fees and all sorts of things. So that's not something I'm going to get into, but we will be having a class on that this month, so I recommend everybody come to it. Angie Haig is with Cornerstone. That's another one, Cornerstone. And then you've got your TRR, right? Your TRR addendum. Now, that is in DocuSign. There was a little bit of confusion. A blank addendum is in DocuSign in the envelopes. It is not a document that you can put into your room. A TRR addendum is a fillable form that you can add into your room and then add to it your envelope. So just make sure that you're not using or looking for the wrong form when doing that. And it is not called a TRR addendum in DocuSign. It is actually written out. It is a repairs, I forget the whole name.
Treatments, repairs, and replacement.
Treatment, repairs, and replacement addendum is what it's called. So you actually have to know what it's actually called when looking for it, because it does not say TRR addendum. So that's actually just a trick in general when talking about DocuSign in Command. In Command, we have used a lot of what people call things like TRR addendum, but in DocuSign, the full name of the form is written out, and that's what it's titled under. So if you have a hard time finding a form that you think is not in there, it most likely is. You just have to figure out what it's called. So another example would be property conditions and disclosure, or property condition disclosure. And I believe it's called Appendix A, property condition disclosure in DocuSign, because there are multiple types. And the one that has all of the buttons for them to pick is an Appendix A. I struggled with that myself. It took me like 6 forms before I was like, oh, that's the one. So sometimes it can be a little tricky. So this is the common name that we all know it by. If you have a hard time finding it in DocuSign, just try to think of what the actual form is called. Okay, and then contract info booklet, that's optional. You do not have to include that. Same with that lead-based pamphlet, which we already talked about. And then addendum to contract. Again, it's conditionally required where applicable, meaning if you don't have an addendum to the contract, you obviously don't need that form there. However, if you do have an addendum to your contract, you have to make sure it's in there. That is the difference. Now, like I was saying before with adding an item, if there is a document that you need to add that does not already have a spot, you can add it. So what would be an example of something that would need to be compliance checked that you would have to add? What if the buyer puts in an offer and the seller gives you a counter offer and your buyer counters again, right? There's only one here. You're not gonna put in the listing person's counter offer and then replace it with your buyer's new counter offer, right? You have to actually add another counter offer in because all of the counters need to be in there for compliance to make sure that nobody signed anything that they shouldn't have or that all the dates are accurate and things of that nature. So you just will add an item, and it will be buyer counter offer. And then we're gonna say, and then that's gonna be it. And then you can drag and drop it in here. I don't have a DocuSign room started for this one yet because we were just talking about what documents would be in here. But there would be a button here that says DocuSign and you would be able to pull it right from there. And then you would hit save. And then it would be added in here. I didn't add a document, so that's why it said that. So you would be able to add that in. This is the list, like I said, that has been agreed upon for Peggy, or by Peggy and Bob and through Sherry at the MCA's office. So you want to not add a bunch of forms that are not required. So don't go through here and be like, okay, well, I also sent them this informational packet on new construction financing. That's not something that we need to have compliance reviewed. So if you did that, great, keep that in your DocuSign because we don't need to see it. If you have a pamphlet about things that you should do on the first night that you move into your new home, congratulations, you're under contract. Here's a list of things you should do on your first night in your new home. Hang up a picture, mop your floors, whatever. That's great. That's something that you're doing for your client as part of your business practice, but that's not something we need to compliance review. So you don't have to add that in there. So just don't add a bunch of stuff in here unless it's privy to the contract.
I have a question.
Yes.
If my contract was extended, whether it's the listing agreement that's extended or the buyer's contract, where would I put that?
So an extension would be, you would put that in, okay, hold on. An extension would be, it's not an addendum, it's an extension. So I would add an item. I would add the extension up here and I would put in that it's a contract extension as its title. So the document name, I would put extension to contract or contract extension, whichever it's titled on the top of it. And then I would include that, but then I would also put an add comment and I would at Bob. And then I would say, I have an extension added to this contract, please review. Because by the time you get to an extension on your contract, you should have already submitted this folder to Bob and had it approved. So when you make a change on something after it's been approved, it is important for you to add a comment and add Bob because Bob needs to know that he needs to go back and review that. And
yeah, so they also,
go ahead.
I was gonna say they also need to add me.
Okay.
Because if it has been approved by Bob and then they add that extension, it's going to remove that approved tag on the under contract folder. So then if I haven't given them the DA yet, then I don't think it's ever been approved, right? Because I only see what's visible there.
Mhm.
So that's going to be the best thing is, like you recommended to add Bob, but then also at Sherry Maxwell to let me know that it's the extension that changed that title there.
Yes. So you just want to make sure that if you're making changes, especially if you've already submitted it to the Market Center for approval, that if it's been approved, especially, you want to make sure that any additions, replacements, anything of that nature, get a comment added to them. Just like when Bob rejects a file, he adds a comment and tells you why he's rejecting it. If you're going to make a change, you need to reciprocate and add a comment and say why you're making a change. And like Sherry said, add her in there as well if it's an extension, because that will affect your DA. So another thing to note is you can attach multiple forms. So if this is the start of your transaction, you can actually, again, I didn't start my DocuSign room. I probably should have done that already, but you want to click DocuSign and then select all of the forms in here. So that way you can do them all at once instead of having to go line by line by line and then finding them individually. It allows you to do a mass import, which is super helpful. Trust me, because when we didn't have that button, it was taking a hot minute. So that is what you're going to be looking for documents. Now, I'm going to say this because it's just a recent issue that we kind of stumbled upon. You have to make sure that your file for closed is complete before you move it to this section of closed. Once you move it to this section of closed on your pipeline, when you go from under contract to closed, we can't see it anymore because it's closed. So you want, if you have changes that you still need to be making and it's closed, you want to make sure that you're leaving it in the under contract. Here, let me make you guys little for a second. And then under contract, and then what I would recommend doing, oopsie, is editing, oopsie, I hit the button. Editing the stages and say, where it says clear to close, I would probably add another one here that just said closed in progress. Oopsie, not prowess, progress. And then I would put that there, so that way you have enough time, especially, I mean, you guys don't have admin on this call, but if you have admin, you want to make sure that there's enough time for everybody to get everything in there and ready before moving it to the closed file. Just like when you guys have opportunities that you create and you open, but that you haven't actually put any forms in or anything like that. Depending on where you have that in your pipeline, sometimes it's hard for us to find for compliance. And so we don't know you have one until you move it over. So it's the same deal. Thankfully, that particular feature has been worked on. And recently, I think in the last 2 or 3 weeks, they updated that. So now we have a little bit more ability to see them if they're open, even if they're sitting in a funky place. So, but that is something that we kind of came across in this last week that was an issue, and they had moved it to the closed section of their pipeline. And then lo and behold, we ended up having an issue and we couldn't, we had to pull it back into the under contract in order for them to continue to add paperwork to it. So just
finish the checklist,
yeah, so they hadn't finished their checklist. The checklist was gone because they moved it, and needless to say, it just was a bit of a hassle. So I highly recommend adding a stage that says closed in progress in the under contract, where you can still work on it and still get everything in there and submit that to the MC before moving it to this closed section, because then it won't be searchable for us. Okay, so let's go back down to Donna Duck. So this was the opportunity we were working in. So we have our under contract, say we filled all that out. Now we are looking to put in an offer, right? We've put in an offer. We're going to add a new offer. It's going to be the initial offer on whichever property we are going to be purchasing, right? At that point, when you went under contract, you go back to details and you rename that opportunity. Let's see. Okay, so you're gonna rename that opportunity because now you are under contract. And we're gonna be in inspections. And our estimated contract date, let's see, we went under contract on the 6th, and our estimated close date is actually the 30th, okay? So we're gonna be doing A-OK. We're gonna save those details, and we are going to add the property address in here. 1, 2, 3. We're gonna go with West Main Street because that one's actually real. And that will put in the information for my details, and then we're gonna go to offers. We're gonna add an offer. It's our initial offer. And the offer date, we're gonna change that to 30th. We're gonna put in 1, 2, 3, West Main Street, Norman. And parties. Now, if this is a real purchase, you would be able to search the KWLS in order to actually link it to a listing. That would be preferable. However, like I said, this is just an example, so I'm not going to do that because I don't want to mess with anything too wonky. Accidentally submit something that they're going to be like, why are you doing that? Sorry, so sorry. Okay, so this will default some of the details of my buyer because I already have that information in the opportunity. So it has the name, it has their email, it has their phone number. We're going to say that they're pre-approved. Let's see. It has my name, my email. It does not have my phone number in here. You can add that if you would like to. It has a spot for the seller's name. So we're going to say that Donna Duck is buying this from Guferus Magus. Guferus Magus. That's who he's buying from. So that's the seller's name. You can put the address here. Let's see, so the address for them is going to be 123 West Main Street. And you're going to say that your real estate agent's name is Molly Anderson. And then you can put her email here for contact, phone number if you have it, and then you're going to go to terms. I mean, you should have their phone number. It's on the MLS, but and then you're going to do terms. So let's see. We're going to do, we said VA, right? So we're not going to do a down payment. We're just going to finance the whole dang thing, the whole shebang. So we're going to do $149,000. The sales price is going to be that's $1,000 under our budget, okay? Their earnest money, they're going to put in $500. We don't have an option fee, I heard. I don't know if that's true. Do we have an option fee? I didn't think so.
Not in Oklahoma, no.
Yeah, see, so some of these things are a little funky. Like I don't even know what that is. But we don't have one, so just skip it. Okay, termination option. Buyer will give notice of termination within 10 days of contract. That's whatever you have in your contract or whatever is going to be included in your offer. I'm just going to do 10 days because it's a pretty round number, and that's what I'm going to put. Seller to contribute to residential service contract. Do you normally put anything in there? I know some people put like $100, some people put nothing. I think
That's for the home warranty.
For the warranty.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the
Mine's like $575 or something.
I was gonna say it's normally like $500, I think. So $575, that sounds good. and seller will contribute to settlement costs. What's that normally look like on your end?
It should be 0, otherwise they're gonna be paying some of the commissions and things like that.
Okay, we'll just leave it 0 then.
And that's where you would put the closing costs, right?
If you're gonna send that to your client, yes.
So you can do a pros and cons. The nice thing about the pro and con is if you're doing multiples, right? So if this were a listing and you had 10 offers come through and you were putting them all in here, you could do a pro and con for each one. This one is a cash buyer, definite pro. A con, this one is $5,000 under asking. This one, whatever your pro and con for that particular offer, because and then you hit save, there will be an option at some point. I don't think it's quite there yet, but there is going to be the option of you sending this via email as a compiled list to your seller. So if you have 10 offers in there, you can send them all at once with all of the pro and cons lists for them to review. Now you're also obviously going to call them and have that conversation with them, but it's almost like an email record of you having provided all of the details about each offer. Like I said, I don't think that that's quite up to snuff yet. You can send it individually, but I don't know that there is a way to send them all at once yet. It is, like I said, something that they're always releasing new information on. So, but I will look for that as things progress and develop. But you can send this individually. You can also remove the offer. So say you put something in and you're like, oh my gosh, I just totally made a lot of mistakes on that one. You can remove it or you can edit it. So, say you do want to actually, you want to add the phone number for this person.
No, you can't. If you have 2 buyers, you can't add 2 buyers to it,
Add 2 buyers to it.
like husband and wife.
Oh, I only had a single buyer on this. I didn't have a co-buyer, so I'm not sure. Let's look and see when we add offer.
I don't think it does the multiple buyers yet, but maybe if that's how it was in the beginning, maybe.
Okay, I didn't see it when I did it, so I didn't know if I
Yeah.
did that part right.
Yeah, it doesn't look like
Yeah.
Yeah. We have found a couple of little tidbits here and there where we're like, oh, I hope that's something that they're going to be working on. Adding a co-buyer into the offer obviously would be a good one. Another one that we had was there is one of our agents is doing a listing and there are 3 sellers. And in DocuSign, you can add a 3rd signature without a problem, but you can't add a 3rd seller in the details. So every time she sends something, she has to manually add the 3rd person in, because there's not a way to do that in the details part yet. So there are a few things that we're finding that we're like, oh, well, it would be super helpful if we could do this. And they're coming out with new things all the time. So it's getting there. Now, one thing I will say about the offers is you'll notice the next tab in this pipeline is commissions, right? You can't click on it. It's grayed out. And you won't be able to until you have an offer in this section and you accept it. You can have 10 offers in here and reject a couple of them. Until you hit accept on an offer, it will not allow you to move on to commissions. So one thing to pay attention to is if you plan to get paid at the table, you have to put an offer in. If you get 10 offers and you don't put all 10 offers in here, that's not the greatest business practice, But at the same time, that's up to you. As long as you have presented all 10, you're still good to go. But you have to put the offer in that you're going to be accepting and accept it. That has to happen in here, or you will not be able to request a DA from Sherry. And
It's like the top part of your green sheet. I know, Jean and Polly, you probably did the old-fashioned green sheet, right? So where it had all that compilation of all that information until, like, there was so much information until you got down to your actual dollar commission. That's what the offer is it's entering all that information for the DA, yeah.
yeah. So of course, I highly recommend, as part of your good business practice, that you input every offer that you get. Now, I suggest that because this is a digital record, even though this will eventually fall off your opportunities pipeline, you will still be able to recall it by searching all opportunities. So you'll be able to see all of that. This is a digital version or filing cabinet for you, kind of like DocuSign. So it's a good idea to put them all in there. And then as the technology develops, like I said, you will also be able to be sending all 10 of these to your clients so that you have a digital record that they have also seen all 10 of these offers, and you're not just going to take my word for it that I showed it to somebody, right? So it's just a good idea to do that anyway. So I'm going to accept it. I've accepted it. Now my commissions is highlighted and it is a clickable field. So I would click here to start my commissions. Now, like I said, there's going to be a commissions class later this month. So I'm not going to go into the details of commissions because that's not my wheelhouse. That's totally Sherry. And at the same time, I'm just like super like not going to go there. One thing I will tell you though is just to make sure that when you did your details that you put 3% for your commission, because if you put any other number for the commission rate here, that is where these are going to auto-populate from. And when you do start to get down into your agent breakdown, if you have it wrong in your details, you're going to start in the wrong place up here, and then you won't be able to get the okay to submit. So you have to just make sure that you're being vigilant in putting in the details properly. That way, when you get to that part, you're not like trying to play catch up. Yes.
So also on the details there that you have, you also are required on your property right there. If you scroll back up, yeah, right there, you're required to have the address in there for the commissions and the offers. So your commission will go through if that's blank.
Yes. And so once you do attend commissions class and know how to do that, and you have requested that DA from Sherry, the place that you will find your DA is actually going to be in your documents, because what she sends you, that DA, it's a piece of paper. It is documentation that says you deserve to be paid at the table according to this breakdown. So please write my check. So you will go to documents, and there will be this little button right here that says closed. You have your under contract. There will be a green box here that says approved, because you're only going to request and get your commissions if you have approved files. Next to closed will be a gray box with a little X in it, and next to it says open, right? It's gonna almost kind of look like this color. It's like a dark gray. And it will say open. And the very first line, very first document in that folder is DA. This is where Sherry will put your DA. It is your responsibility, and you should tell anybody that you are having you help you with TC work, or if you decide to have an admin, anything like that. It is very important that everyone know who you're working with, that the DA will be located here, because you are the one who has to send it to title company. Sherry is not sending it to anybody but you in this location. So if you want to get paid at the table, once you have your DA, it is your responsibility to make sure it makes it to title for them to be able to write those checks. If that doesn't happen, if you leave it sitting in there and you don't send it to title, they're going to write the checks to us, and then you're going to have to wait for them to be processed, and then you'll get your check on the following Friday at like 3 or 4 o'clock. So just make sure that you're paying attention. If you have requested a DA and you don't know if it's been there yet, check your closed folder before you go bug Sherry, which is what I will tell you to do if you ask me, oh, my DA, go bug Sherry.
So I know that we had talked about it a little bit, Sherry, but it was a little different. If we had both the buyer and seller getting the full 6%, we only have one DA, right?
No,
We're
you're
not
gonna
going to
have
have
one for
two.
each side. You're gonna have a DA in each opportunity. So you're gonna have an opportunity for the list side and an opportunity for the buy side. So each
Yeah,
one is gonna have their own DA because
but
as
they will.
Tiffany, huh?
Will they include it all together? So we're sending Title I document or two?
Nope, they get two.
Okay.
Now, because you are getting, like you said, if you have both sides, you would be getting the full amount, the full 6%. You would get the two DAs because they're two separate opportunities. Because even though 123 Main Street is the property, you have the listing of 123 Main Street and you have the buyer for 123 Main Street. Well, it's kind of like it's two halves of the whole, right? So you're still going to send them a form for your listing and a form for your buyer. But what they choose to do for checks is going to be at the title. So they may issue you a single check for the lump sum. I don't think so because they're going to do it according to the DA. So you may just end up with duplicate checks. So just pay attention to that part and make sure that it looks okay. But you will get two separate DAs because you have two separate sides of the transaction. And then you will have to send them both to title. But yeah, so now, does anybody have any questions about any of that stuff that we went over, just the pipeline part of it, what's required, what's conditionally required, and what you need to fulfill for requirements before you can get to commissions? No? Everybody kind of good on that one? Okay, so the reason that I did this is so I'm trying to cut down on the whole 2-hour thing. 2 hours is a long time. It's a long time for me to talk. It's a long time for you to sit there and have your butt fall asleep. So I am cutting these down to an hour, and I'm trying to make it work that you have an hour today, and then what we talk about today will be built on when you attend on Monday for a DocuSign class, right? So I'm going to use this same opportunity on Monday's class for DocuSign. And what we're going to be talking about is starting that transaction button. And we're going to create a room for this opportunity. And we're going to talk about documents. We're going to talk about what forms are, what your PDFs are going to look like, and things of that nature. So that's what we're going to be talking about, what you can do with your documents tab in DocuSign. Say you choose to you do get wet signatures, how you can put them all in, split them apart, put them together, all of that kind of fun stuff in the document section. So I'm going to try to build on how all of this works together, but I'm going to do it in like 1 hour sections, just to kind of keep it short and sweet for everybody. So if you guys don't have any other questions, I think we can wrap this one up. Paula, do you have something? You're muted.
Okay, so if I like to put in like my inspections and stuff just to like have it all together, would you suggest doing like a custom folder so that way Bob doesn't have to see it, but I've got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, you can do that. Like I said, DocuSign and Command are two separate systems, but they work together. So it's kind of like when you see those diagrams where it's like, I don't have like a plain piece of paper. Hold on. I have a whiteboard. So think of it this way. You've got this really cool system, DocuSign. That's where all of your forms live for you to send out for signatures. And then you have this rockin' system called Command, where your contacts, your pipeline, your lead generation, all that stuff lives, right? And then you have this section in the middle that kind of looks like an almond joy. filled with joy. And that little almond is compliance. And that's where the two meet. So DocuSign is your form filing cabinet. Everything that you need in a transaction sits in your DocuSign, right? So if you like to have, what was that form called that you said you like to have? Your inspections?
Mm-hmm.
So you say you have inspections. Another thing that you may have is receipts for repairs that were done, right? Something of that nature. Those are things that Bob doesn't need to compliance review, but you want to have record of. You want to be able to say X, Y, and Z was done. Here's the estimates. This has been completed per the TRR or whatever, right? So that's going to live here because you want to have a record of that, but it doesn't need to be compliance reviewed. So you can put that into DocuSign and it will be held forever, just like if you had printed it out and put it in a paper file from back in the day. I don't know that you're old enough to know what back in the day means, but if you are, there used to be paper files for compliance, and this right here is your paper file in a digital platform. So command doesn't need anything from that, but compliance is where they meet. Bob doesn't need it for compliance either. So where it should live is here. Now, if you absolutely felt it necessary for it to be in your section, it's not part of command or for compliance. So you would want to put it in a separate folder that Bob doesn't have to see, because otherwise he will attempt to compliance review it. And then he'll be like, why is this in here, right? So with DocuSign being your filing cabinet, I would have that form live there because it's going to still have all of your other documentation in it. All of the forms that you've had signed and you've put in for compliance review will also be here, and it's not going to go anywhere. And should later on there be any issue, OREC isn't going to look in your command. OREC is going to look at your DocuSign. So if you want to say, but listen, they asked for X, Y, and Z on the TRR, and here's X, here's Y, here's Z, I have the receipts, it was all done per our agreement. This is where they're going to look for it. They're not going to look here in the almond. They're going to take a huge bite right off the bark, coconut and all. So that's where they're going to go. Does that make sense? Okay. So you, like I said, you can, if you absolutely feel like you want to put it in command, you can do that. Put it in a spot where Bob can't see it, which is one of those custom folders. However, DocuSign is really where it has to be if you feel like it needs to be part of your file, because that is what OREC is going to check if there's ever any questions that come up. Any other questions? No? Okay. In that case, I'm going to wrap this up and I'm going to stop sharing. And if you guys do have any questions, you guys can always reach out to me. You know my cell phone. Got my email. I'm sure you got all of my emails because, you know, I like to keep in touch. All right, guys. Thanks for coming, and I will see you later. Bye.